Please. Hello, hello, hello. Yo, my name is DJ Pressure Point, and yeah, it's such a beautiful, beautiful day. We have so much to talk about, so much to celebrate. I have a very special guest in with me to be in this conversation, which is really dope. So I got my man, Josh Ingram. Come on, let's do some like intros. How do you want the world to know you?
Peace, everybody. My name is Josh. Also go by Lorik. I'm a political educator, born and raised in South Florida, Broward, Miami-Dade County. And I'm here today to honor our elders and ancestors, which is something we love to do.
Yeah, we do.
Something we linked over and bonded over at the beginning of all this.
Yeah.
And I'm being reminded right now just who I am. I love to learn as much as teach. And as the first black man to get a PhD from Harvard with Haitian,
Yeah.
I was reminded that Du Bois' mother was Haitian. Du Bois, yes.
W.E.B. Du Bois' mother was Haitian?
Yes, exactly.
That is crazy.
So that's the kind of stuff we like to do as black men do. Study, teach.
Get with my man. We're trying to foster a community, at least here in Miami, because, all things start here.
So let me be clear. We also fact check. So W.E.B. Du Bois was a civil rights leader and scholar whose father was born in Haiti. His father, Alfred, was born to a Haitian woman and a free black sailor. So there we go.
That's crazy. That's crazy that is not information people do not know. All my life I've known who W.E.B. Du Bois is, but I've never heard anyone talk about that piece.
And it's the name. Like you think the name, and then people think it's French.
Yeah, Dubois.
And people pronounce it Dubois, but if you read his writing, that came over there. Oh yes. Oh yeah. And if you read his writings, it's Du Bois. Like he spells it out that way. So again, if bougie people try and correct you and say it's Dubois, it's actually Du Bois, according to the W.E.B. himself. So.
That is crazy. Well, in general, just to give some history on how me and Josh met, I am a recent graduate of the Black Collectives Revolutionary Organizing School, and I was beautifully led over a course of some weeks and a couple months by this brilliant person in our community. I'm so honored that I was able to be in a space of community share and knowledge and even debate. There was a lot of different moments within that course where we were able to really challenge each other, but in a very respectful manner, and really learn collectively with a group of amazing individuals. And from that, we were able to kind of discuss some lost history and decide, who are we? Are we guerrilla intellectuals? Are we organizers? Really put that to task. And through that course, I learned a little bit about Martin Luther King. Of course, we were studying just how we have chosen to remember his work on, at least on a commercial scale, but how that applies to his actual study and where MLK was before he passed on. And I was beautifully taught by this person about, I as someone that, of course, you cannot live in America, let alone be a black person, and not know who Martin Luther King is, but I really didn't know much about what Martin Luther King's political ideations were, what were his moral grounding. I just knew him as a Christian man. He had I had a dream speech, very surface level knowledge around this beautifully complex and radical leader. A lot of people have taken that away from him, but as we learned in this course, his last book is called Where Do We Go From Here? Community or Chaos? And specifically, it was Dr. King's reflection on the work after the summer bus organizing, and he was making his way to Chicago to continue what he thought was triumphant battles in the South and try to take a lot of these practices to the Midwest. And yeah, the times were changing, and a lot of Dr. King's ideologies began to change because the circumstances did as well. And I'm gonna pass it all over to Josh to give us a little bit more details on this conversation.
Oh man, Akia, proof the program works.
You know, did I retain?
That was well done. Yes,
Thank you.
Very,
Thank
very well
you.
done. Once you get the essence, it's just filling in the details. So just the times and the dates and the names. But that's it. So I was taught a very shallow history of King. Most people are taught a very shallow history of King, and we just talk about how that's intentional.
Yeah.
How most people don't know about his books. And it'd be crazy to me because if I wrote a book and I was on a book tour and someone stabbed me because the book was that crazy and people didn't know what the book was called, I'd kind of be like, wow.
Yeah.
And King wrote 4 books. And what they're really good at doing is capturing what he's thinking at the time. So as you're describing, he's moving through different phases of struggle with organizations, with people around him, and he's growing. And his wife, Coretta, is growing with him. And so you see their political development from place to place to place. So what's really interesting about that book writing is, so he was somebody who's been a Christian minister, but that's deeply rooted in Afro-American history. It was through his grandfather. So this is a church that's been in the Georgia community since the 1890s. And he's a pastor, travels around. I like to get into him as a person a little bit because, again, we know him as a towering figure, but
he was a young man.
He was a young man.
A brilliant young man.
And a short king. So I like to talk about him like as an actual person if you would have seen in the streets. I don't think King was more than 5'8" or something like that.
That's crazy.
Very short man. Little boy genius. Graduated.
At 13, right? 13 or 15.
Went to college, 14 years old. And then after he leaves college, he does a gap year, and instead of, fucking around and doing whatever he wanted, he instead went to the tobacco fields. And he worked with the sharecroppers for dollars on the day in the sun, 104 degrees, just picking, crops.
Yeah.
And King was like, oh shit, maybe I do have to take a role, in my community. And so that was a big part of his struggle.
Tobacco field in Georgia, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it might have been Tennessee because he did summers somewhere, but it was in the South. King's life, his background, his experience, very much from a black Southern experience.
Yeah.
He keeps our history and like our cultural continuity together as a role, like not just something he just picked up and did. It was something he was like trained to do his whole life.
Okay, so after this training, what would develop from King's time? Like how was that actually influencing the politic after that gap year? Yeah,
let's dig in. I want to talk a little bit about the book for sure, and I think some of the words from the book will make that really easy.
Yeah.
And then again, just center on King as a person. So he's a person who very much cares about his people. He's inheriting a legacy and a responsibility in the community. So he has a class position. We talk about this.
Yeah.
A little middle class, a little bougie for the black.
The church is a powerful institution.
Absolutely, and he was going to be heir to that institution.
Yeah.
And with that responsibility, he had true love for our people. So it wore on him. Dr. King was someone who was suicidal. So I believe he tried to take his own life.
Multiple times.
Multiple times in his youth. But he, every single time, grounded himself in love for his people. It was never lost on him. So he's going through. He's getting some wins in the South. And he's trying to evaluate for the people coming up after him, for us, what do you need to do? Like what's happening? And King is somebody who starts off young, has some elders in the movement. His elder sisters, Ella Baker, who we've talked about, and Fannie Lou Hamer, who ground him, who are a little pulling him to the left.
Exactly.
A lot of times to get him on the right track. And then he's got younger folks, like Stokely Carmichael, who we know as Kwame Ture. And so King is a figure who's balancing between
two.
All of these things, and between what the youth want, between what the black masses want, the poor working masses, and what we need to do to engage this political machine. So that happens in the South. We get some wins there, not enough, and then he's trying to try it in other places. So you mentioned the Midwest. He takes us up north to Chicago.
Yeah.
He takes us up to where Malcolm's like, look, come up here, find out.
This my territory.
You think it's different.
Yeah.
Find out. And he found out, and he saw that there was a lot going on, a lot of battlegrounds, not just the South. But the core of it was the South. So that's where we get King's final book in 1968. This is the year he's assassinated.
Yeah.
I'm learning about it all the time. We talk about, you'll see me constantly in class. Let me look this up real quick. Let me go.
Yeah.
So he wrote this book in Jamaica.
Oh, okay. Because I always see these photos of Dr. King on the beach. Like my man was definitely
the little rare photos. Of
Yes.
With sunglasses and Coretta on the beach.
He's on the beach, and even just other stuff. Like I think when he made his trip to, they have pictures of him in Florida on the beach. So I really love that, like, the ocean was a centering place for creativity for him.
Yeah. And I was going to add, you already jumped ahead. So that's the Miami history, too. So
Yeah.
King drafted versions of I Have a Dream speech, although it was co-written and things like that,
Yeah.
In the hotel, downtown, Overtown.
Okay.
Lyric Theater.
Wow.
So if you go in that area, that was where King was. One Night in Miami, that discussion of Malcolm X, Sonny, who was it? Jim Brown.
Jim Brown, Muhammad Ali,
and
Sam Cooke. Yeah.
He's gonna come. Right. That.
Yeah.
All that's Miami history. But that's why I think King is so interesting. We know him as just a Baptist preacher, almost like tied to Atlanta. And
Yeah.
first thing, that's beautiful in itself. But he was a world figure.
Mhm.
So that's why, he wants to write a book. He could pop off to Jamaica
Exactly.
for a little bit and do
But
that.
he's a writer at its core too. Like, he's moving like a writer as well.
And around a lot of great writers too, like James Baldwin. And
Yes.
So he is around. He is how I would describe our ambassador, Black America's ambassador, which is why we'll get into
Black Southern ambassador.
We have a few, right? Because I would argue that Malcolm, not argue, but our friends in the CIA would say that Malcolm was an agent for Black America. That was how he was. He was like a diplomat. And King was as well. So
I love that,
yeah,
and I wish like more Black folks, at least in our generation now, kind of take that on as they travel the world. We're being able to experience so many planes and countries that I know most of the people in my family will never have the opportunity to go to. So you are an ambassador in some sort. Yeah. So I think, yeah.
And what's fascinating, like, that's absolutely true. You have to represent your people wherever you go. And through organizing, people who you would think, again, wouldn't cross paths, end up crossing paths very often. So someone like Fannie Lou Hamer actually went to Africa. And again, was greeted there by a head of state.
South Africa.
Maybe South Africa. I'm trying to remember. It was West Africa where I saw.
Okay.
She was greeted by a president there and treated like royalty. She was taking a shower there, having a great time. And this is somebody who was getting that honor because of what she did for our people here. And it wouldn't have happened if she hadn't stood up the way she did.
Love that. Love that.
So we have his book here. So he's writing it in Jamaica. It's his last book. And you can't find this book in bookstores, mainstream bookstores about King. It's really interesting. It just kind of goes out of print, right? Kind of like King is assassinated and we just are told this is the shooter and it just kind of fades away. But with time, we know. So in class, we talked about the Lloyd Jowers case. So in the 90s, the King family sued
the American government.
Yep, and within an hour, the jury realized that everything they said, made sense. So the U.S. government lied. The story was made up. King was assassinated, and we knew that from years ago. Our own organizers who were in the military, if you think about it, who were a lot of King was all over. He was our ambassador. They went and researched it. They already knew certain things didn't line up. Certain people weren't where they were supposed to be. The tree that was supposed to be in front of the balcony had been taken down the day before. So they already knew what was up. But the case was by the King family so the world could see. Again, that was King's thing, embarrass people before the world.
Exactly.
Let them know. So they won the case, and they didn't ask for any money, just $1, as restitution, just that $1 to prove
that this was true.
Right.
We were right.
Yeah, so we have that long journey. So King's assassinated physically, but he's also assassinated in legacy. So we don't get to hear about his book. So even in the banned book list in Florida, as much as some of those books are valuable, right, there's some books that are at a level of radical, they're not even on the list yet. So where do we go from here is one of those books. That's King's last book in 1968. Most people don't know about it. And if you go to the King gift shop in D.C., it's nowhere there. You'll see books about King. You'll usually see what I got when I was a kid, like speeches and little, like his quotes. That's why you think he's a preacher. So I'm like, he doesn't have books. He just wrote a sermon here or there. No, he had how it works. Like you said, he was a writer.
Every time I think about where do we go from here, I do naturally think of the Solange track off of the first album, A Seat at the Table. So I wonder if like that was like an Easter nugget that she was trying to leave within the work.
If she knows.
Because it's literally this song
Shout
title.
out.
She repeats it multiple times. And like the Carter family is good for leaving little nuggets in the music.
Well, you know me. I'm always a hater. But
yes, you should be. We critique. We have to critique everyone.
I will say that my positive critique to Solange would be to maybe go the no-name route. Be more explicit, have some book clubs about the book, maybe put it on that Instagram with all them followers.
Exactly,
you know what I'm saying? But if that is an Easter egg, that's really dope. And I think they picked sayings that I think reflected how everyone felt.
Yeah.
So King picked that intentionally. I'm sure a lot of people arrive at that thought. So in the book, it gets reprinted in like 2010.
Okay.
And now we get a foreword from one of King's comrades, Vincent Harding, and then his wife, Coretta, writes us a brief letter at the start to summarize the book, and then I wanted to read that.
Please.
Yeah, and we co-read.
Let's co-read. Come on.
Let's go. So, okay.
All right.
Long foreword, and then we have, the foreword. Perfect. Okay. You want to start?
I can start us off.
I'll do paragraph by paragraph. Go.
It was a characteristic of my husband that in 1967, when confusion in the civil rights struggle abounded, he would undertake a book titled, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? He's not only took the responsibility for leadership, he toiled vigorously to offer discerning leadership.
In this book, he piercingly revealed the cause of our national discord, placing it squarely on the ingrained white racism of American society. He made discrimination and poverty the central focus of his attacks. A year later, spending nearly $1 million with a huge staff, the National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders was to come to the same essential conclusions.
In this work, Martin Luther King Jr. stresses the common cause of all of the disinherited, white and black, laying the basis for contemporary struggle now unfolding around economic issues. He spoke out sharply for all the poor in all their hues, for he knew if color made them different, misery and oppression made them the same. The book is remarkably contemporary, also in its treatment of international relations. This is important. The author here discusses poverty as a source of world instability and the arrogance of wealthy nations toward the deprived world. It is our common tragedy that we have lost his prophetic voice, but it would compound the tragedy if the lessons he did articulate are now ignored. The glowing spirit and the sharp insight of Martin Luther King Jr. are embodied in this book. The solutions he offered can still save our society from self-destruction. I hope that it will be seen as a testament and that the grief of that followed his death will be transmuted into universal determination to realize the economic and social justice for which he so willingly gave his life. Coretta Scott King. May 1968. Wow. So that's how this book opens. And she makes the argument clear. King is pointing out that poverty is the main issue that we're facing, and that poverty is an international problem. So we started talking about our international connections. Yeah. And I think that's really important. That was like kind of what King was focusing on, you know? So I love that she also, because it almost just feels like a time capsule, because she knew, of course, we'll be revisiting this text. It's so timely that I feel like we're all collectively trying to figure out where do we go from here, especially as we're coming up on MLK's birthday, as well as the day that the next administration gets sworn in. That's true. Same day. This time around. The same exact day. Donald Trump will take the throne again. Given this text, this sacred text, what were some nuggets that you think Martin Luther King wanted us to know about where and how to get to where we're going? Yes, absolutely. As always, I'm going to recommend reading the book itself. Please. And then I always have links. So if you need a plug, hit me up. I got you on the virtual copies. But the book is great. It's broken down. He's a preacher and he's speaking to our people. So it's pretty accessible in how he writes it, which some people could learn from in this era. And he breaks the book down into some chapters. So I'll just read them off here. First is Where Are We?
Then Black Power, Racism and the White Backlash, The Dilemma of Negro Americans, Where We Are Going, and The World House. So he starts off with where we are and then tries to push us to where we're going. And I would love today to just do a little retrospective on what the book is arguing, but also critique, because King was a revolutionary in development. And then, of course, when he reaches one of his most dangerous points, he's taken out. But there's a King that you can quote from the 1950s that a lot of people will quote that sounds very different from the King in 1968 writing this book.
Exactly. Because, I think in general, like, folks try to remove the level of privilege that we all have inherently, whether it's you being born into a Christian family, let alone a Christian family of power. So you can speak to Black people from a space of class at the end of the day and access that a lot of Black folks don't have, or from a place of being a cis male. Yeah, you may be a Black man, but you're a Black man in a marginalized community that doesn't have the same power because they're not participating in patriarchy in the same way. So I think there's always left to critique from all of us that, I'm happy that we have this sacred text to be able to use.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. And in some ways, I look at King and I'm like, you have to be read this way. King maintained his identities with integrity, which is important, right? So he is a Christian Baptist minister. He's pushing back in so many ways to the system that he was never going to be allowed in leadership of the National Baptist Convention. But still, there are certain things of that structure, of that tradition that you expect, like him being patriarchal to some degree, like him taking leadership.
Homophobic.
Right, like him being homophobic, and like the people around him, right? Because this is the thing, his advisory group also having those reservations. These are the people telling him, don't do this, you can't do that. So what's funny is, a lot of times when King realizes he needs to be challenged, the same way Ella Baker did and said, all right, I need to get some young folks, I need to pick. King is real clever in how he's challenged. So he'll sometimes be like, well, Dr. King can't do this, but Martin, he says y'all should do da-da-da-da-da. So in the second chapter, he gets into Black Power and he talks about Kwame Ture.
I love that.
And that was the same thing. Kwame Ture says, honestly, Dr. King, I was just using you so we could get the slogan off. And Dr. King laughs and says, that won't be the last time. I'm good with that. So Dr. King had his own limitations. But I do think he was someone who was honest enough to face them. Which is what's special.
And also still young enough to understand that I'm a part of a youth culture that should thrive off of rebellion. So I just want to
think about how his youth was almost, in some ways, his youth is taken.
He was accelerated.
He was, and he was already looking to get married. Like, and that was the age. That was the era we know. But
the
like,
times.
He's in his 30s. He's not that old. He's my age, essentially.
He hit his Jordan year, not Jordan year, Christ year.
Yeah, and LeBron's 39, so now it's all a LeBron year below 40. Really. He was a baby in some senses.
So in terms of like this martyrdom, what else can we learn from King's passing? We're coming up on his birth, but there's so much from his passing that I think we still have yet to untouch.
Well, I would say we should be firm on the things that he was clear on, that we know were just spot on correct. And then on some of the things, we don't have to go through the hurdles that he did and the dance he had to do for his own safety. Because at the end of the day, unfortunately, even when he tried to say, I'm not with those radicals, I'm not a communist, I don't do all of that, the feds had him marked for communism anyway. The feds had him marked for death regardless. Because what he was doing was so dangerous and so honest that it didn't matter. So I would say we should be clear on what he was right about, and we've talked about this. He said there were 3 evils. And he basically said, this is how you know you're a revolutionary. These are the 3, and he's a preacher, so 3 points. He said number 1 is racism. But we know that's broader now. So we say it's identity-based domination, anything, racism, homophobia, patriarchy, transphobia, all of these forms of domination and empire, King says they got to go. Second thing is he says poverty, but he's real careful because if you say the C words, that puts a beam on your head.
Exactly.
But he's saying capitalism. And then Vincent Harding mentions that he's moving away from not even claiming socialism by the end of his life. So he says 2, poverty, capitalism, got to go. And then the third thing, which is linked to the second thing he says, is militarism or war. And he's explaining war is something that people are profiting off of, a very small portion of people, and the rest of us are suffering. And because King is a historian and holding our historical experiences that way, he is able to take that shit all the way back to slavery.
Yeah.
He's saying this is how we got here. This is how Africa is facing this right now. This is a situation in Vietnam, and these things are all linked. And Coretta is making these connections at the same time, and in both their FBI files, he's saying, hold on, these people might, the word is, internationalize the civil rights movement.
Okay, so with those efforts, because that's what he was trying to do. At the end of the day, I think all black people are trying to do that if they're really trying to connect.
If they're really trying, if you're trying to win, you start looking for the team. But
exactly.
If you're not, you say, let's stay focused on us.
Home is where the heart is, and my home is in a lot of places. Mm-hmm. So with King making his way to Chicago, how successful do you think he was in communicating those 3 points to the people of Chicago?
King was struggling because he, which is the 3rd chapter, when he starts talking about the white backlash, and he starts examining white America, he starts saying the more dangerous enemy was actually the white liberal, not the white conservative.
We have more in common with them, to be honest.
Really?
I would say only because there's a class struggle there. There's a class struggle. I feel like a lot of the black conservatives are also, depending on what I guess identities that you hold in your marginalized community, that white people and white conservatives are still victims within conservatism.
Yeah, I think so. King is very adamant on that. I would say he actually slides a little too much, but he's very adamant on the white working class is poor. He hates poverty, full stop.
Yeah.
King hated any kind of poverty, any kind of suffering for human beings. He was a good Christian in that way.
Yeah.
So he was very focused on poverty.
Yeah.
And understanding that. I would say, though, that yes, he understood class, so he comes after the black middle class.
Okay.
Because he starts saying, because that's the class he's from.
Yeah.
And he's doing what Huey Newton would later call class suicide. He's saying, wait a minute, I can't be this middleman anymore. I'm tired of this shit. Mm-hmm. These people know what's going on.
Yeah.
And King has a really sharp class analysis, so when he starts the book off, he's not talking, again, just some abstract thing. He's talking economic data about our community. So if you read the first chapter of the book, he's saying 75% of black people have menial jobs. 50% of us have below minimum wage. And then he goes on to say the majority of us are poor. So this is something you and I have talked about, that parallel between folks coming from the global south. But I've said, if you look at black America in the 1910s, 20s, 30s, it was the global south. Yeah. In the same way, they were living through apartheid and poverty. Most of our parents came from straight poverty, the ghetto.
And also, the conditions, depending on some areas, has not changed, and they're still living in the global south.
Yeah, we know, and that's the craziest thing. So King is really aware of that. So King is drawing an economic analysis. Yeah. I would say King is missing the mark, and you can just see it, and it's a very obvious hole in his analysis, is King is trying to save America. Yeah. And he says it, Coretta's like, stop it from self-destructing. They're very invested in what America can be and making it live up to its values. Missing in that analysis almost every single time is, well, what about Native Americans? Yeah. Where are Native Americans in King's analysis, in his liberation ideology? And a lot of times they're missing. Okay. And so I would say that is where the first thing falls apart. When the Haitians got free, we know what the island's named after. They said the Taínos.
Exactly.
We honor them. We respect them.
Remember them.
That is not present in King's philosophy very often. You miss that. He's so focused on bringing unity, saving people, that he's forgetting the people that we need to be focused on in the first place. Yeah. So black people need to be in conversation with Native Americans to understand how our oppression is linked. And I think King, unfortunately, skips over that a lot of times. Okay.
So what was some of the conflict that was going on between King's struggle and within the Black Panther Party in Chicago? Because they're happening at the same time.
They're happening around the same time, but they're coming up a little after him. I mean, This is the thing. So we got 65 Malcolm's assassinated. Yeah. We're coming up on 100 years. Malcolm was born in 1925. He's 4 years older than King. Okay. So Malcolm's assassinated in 65. The Panthers are considered the heirs of Malcolm, the people who took on his legacy, like Asada, right? And they are starting to get active. So when Malcolm's wife, sorry, when Betty
Yes.
is at the airport, the Panthers go and meet her, like armed security, and say, "You are." That's what I'm saying. There are diplomats.
Yeah.
And the black community can recognize that there are leaders, not these politicians.
And also the black people have a beautiful way of determining who we see as leaders too.
Yeah.
And does it have to be royal?
Right. It has to be earned.
Yeah.
Is the thing. So there's youth. There's youth movement in the South with SNCC. Again, the Black Panther Party is a dialectic. So it's the Southern people who give them the Black Panther logo.
Yeah.
So the South is realizing it through the youth, and then the urban ghettos of the North are realizing it too, and then you got the West Coast.
Yeah.
So the Panthers are organizing the urban ghetto to deal with the fact that what King is talking about in this book, the civil rights movement can't deliver on all its promises.
Yeah.
We need to move to a next stage. So King is just an interesting figure where he's balancing between the worlds. He's being pulled toward the revolutionary direction, toward the stopping the war in Vietnam, and that is when he's assassinated. So his assassination, in a lot of ways, is a signal to the Panthers and to other young groups that it's time.
Mobilize.
Like James Baldwin writes, "No more water, the fire next time."
Yeah.
So now people are like, that's when the city's burned,
Yeah.
which is reminiscent of our era, right? When
Yeah.
someone dies. Now when our own people die, unfortunately, we still are rising up in similar ways.
Yeah.
But in the past,
It was a
lot
more of a
times
response.
tied to leadership.
Yeah.
And not leadership in the classic sense, but people
Yeah.
who represented
The morals.
the movement.
The movement.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. So, in general, with where do we go from here? I'm having to think about, like we've just been saying earlier, just like so much of living in now Florida. This book is going to be banned. We're celebrating this man every 2 seconds, whether it's club promotion or we have a party.
That's true. We
Like
got the club promotion.
we have the club
Crazy,
promotion.
on the 20th.
It's
Yep.
crazy. It's crazy. He's now been reduced. His legacy and all of these lost histories are now being reduced to the very thing that he's been fighting, which is capitalism. So where do you think we go from here in terms of how to really integrate? I think I'm doing my own experiment with the party. It's like, okay, really making sure that like we're loud about the legacy as we are still, we're participating in capitalism. We're throwing a party, but this party is going to be grounded around the idea of community and hopefully birth within conversation there. Yeah, we're shaking ass, but yeah, it's a political act that we're all even choosing to gather together in this space. So what are some other ways that you think would be helpful during this time period to honor the legacy of MLK, but also deal with the times? We're in these times.
Well, you gave me a great opportunity for a plug there. So
Come on, please.
Jump into that next. And then I'm going to hit you back with a question after.
Come
so
on.
Just remember, you know how this goes. So the relevance to this time, what do we have to do now? I mean, King wrote the book as a question and then is giving us a blueprint. So the first thing is we have to know what he said. You know me, like there's no shortcuts. What was said? And study is a collective practice. So it's not you going and getting all the answers on your own. It's coming together in community and learning what was happening, what were the lessons that were left. I said this to you before. If you're assassinated, to me that means you won. That means the enemy like, God, get him off.
You got too
Get
close.
him off the board.
Yeah.
You're too good. So how do we understand the lessons and understand the mistakes? Because they're also telling you what they did wrong. So that would be my broader explanation. But again, study and action have to be linked. So you're honoring King's legacy by actually organizing, by actually going into your community and doing things with a political focus. So that's what I would say. The 20th comes around. Dr. King's legacy, his material reality has been abstracted. It's been turned into an ideal of service. So now we have days of service. Now you go and you plant flowers in a gentrified neighborhood and you're honoring King's legacy. Now everything is honoring King's legacy. So I would be clear on what he did and that your service is tied to study and action. So that is how I would say it's not just okay to serve. Don't shame young children because they want to stay inside and play PlayStation instead of going out to serve some shit.
Yeah.
Serve in an organization. Serve in a way that's actually advancing your people would be my first thing. So study, action, the plug.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do that same thing. I'm trying to live by example as King
Yeah.
did. So I would recommend joining organizations. If you are in a place where you don't have a radical organization, you might have to start one yourself.
Emphasis on the radical.
Akia, no. You might have to start something yourself, and you definitely have the tools to do that with community. So I would say join an organization. I'm a part of Black Men Build. Black Men Build is a national organization. And we have political education programs. I'm the PE co-chair in Miami. Got a Haitian co-chair with me.
Come on, come on, Sapphire say.
And we're having a armed self-defense training.
Yeah.
So We Will Shoot Back is the name. If you follow Black Men Build Miami on Instagram, you'll be able to check that information out. And you can come. We pair action with study. So we're going to be working on armed self-defense for our communities with you already know who coming back into power.
We
2.0.
love.
But even when Barry O was in power, you already know we needed that. We were dying under Barry too. So that January 16th and January 26th. So I recommend you check those out. We're also going to launch a study group with that. The event's called We Will Shoot Back. It's based off a book called We Will Shoot Back, which is about the armed defense struggle in Mississippi. How when there was nonviolence going on, there were some folks who might have gotten a little violent to protect the nonviolence. So breaking through that myth through study is what we're trying to do too. Dr. King himself had a weapon, so y'all know. He was armed because they threw bombs in the house with little girls, so he knew what was up. But the nonviolence is a tactic, so we got to remember that.
So what are some closing notes that we want to impart and to really stress the need of really like engaging with this work?
Well,
Engaging
I had
with this
the question
text.
for you. So
Come with the test,
we'll
man.
do that.
Come on.
So what does Black Power mean to you when you hear that phrase? The first time you heard it, now when you hear it, what is Black Power?
I think Black Power to me means truly collectivizing community. I feel like power for what it means for Black people in our current context is really finding a way to unify all of the either projected, whether it's self or imposed identities, and really unifying under the fact that we are still moving through the world as Black people and being able to recognize that, build community around that, build economy around that, really like a self-affirming, choice of words, opposed to us focusing on how Black folks are viewing Blackness, but how are we inserting that when engaging with one another?
So it sounds like you have a hopeful disposition when you hear Black Power. So in the book, you'll hear that King's debate with Kwame Ture was that Black Power was a thing of bitterness and despair, and that it was coming from a dark place. And in some ways, that's true, obviously. But very clearly, it's a word that means hope for you and for me. So I would say one thing we can take away is that King was worried about what Black Power would mean for the youth moving forward, and I think we understand that it was a positive affirmation. The sacrifices that he made, we had to honor them, and then we got to be clear on what it was he was fighting, and like you said, unite as Black people around that, and not lose sight of the fact that we're an international people. So
exactly.
Black people all around the world, that's colonized people around the world, that's the workers, the peasants of the world as well. And speaking of, don't we have an announcement about the colonized people of the world?
Actually do. So as of today, announced on multiple credible sources. Still, you should do your own research and look for yourself, but announced via BBC as of 2 hours ago, Gaza ceasefire deal to take effect on the 19th of January, says the Qatar government. So that is something very, very timely and beautiful to unite around, to say Black power around, to say queer power around, and to know that like our voices were being heard. I think it's something to say for the last 15 months that we have watched and used the power of social media, of organizing, of doing events, of hopefully that just kept these people alive for 15 months to fight, to at least have these words said that there's a ceasefire coming.
Yeah. And it was negotiated through power, through organized power. It was Israel and Hamas that arrived at the ceasefire. So Israel didn't get to just choose on its own. It had to negotiate with an organized Palestinian force.
So it's the time to celebrate. I think, yeah, I'm so happy to have you on for such a celebratory, like this is
happy
historic.
birthday, Dr. King, for real.
Happy birthday,
birthday.
Dr. King. I can only imagine the things that you would be crossing your minds right now, especially hearing a free nation is going to know at least a bit of peace. Bit of peace. We're far from the fight being over, but we are a step closer for people knowing rest and knowing, determination in a different kind of way.
Yeah. And we miss him. We miss him in Overtown. We miss him in Miami, and I would love to take him around the beaches now so we can see what was up and know we had to fight now. So I miss him dearly.
So I'm going to leave us off with a track called Message to the People. And happy birthday, Dr. King.
Happy birthday,
and
MLK.
forever a free Gaza, a free Haiti, a free Puerto Rico. And may all of these buildings of, white supremacy and capitalism continue to fall in very minimum or mighty wins, because they're collectively edging us forward to a beautiful vision, the same vision that Dr. King, I do believe in that still. I do believe in racial unification, and we have bigger fish to fry than this.
The world's on fire.
The world is on fire, but Gaza ain't.
Free Harlem.
Free Harlem.
Free Palestine. Free the land.
That you can find where, listen, your life is spinning around and your up seems to be down.